An American Idol star joins me now for the first of today's underreported segments. I know, he's not suffering from underexposure in the media, but he's here to talk about a country that doesn't get nearly enough press, Afghanistan. Mr. Aiken recently traveled to Afghanistan as a UNICEF ambassador, where he helped launch the $100,000 in 10 days campaign to support Afghanistan's health centers and schools. And I'm very pleased to welcome him to our show. Hi.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, you've also gone to northern Uganda. You've gone to Indonesia. So do you see this kind of work as one of the responsibilities you had to take on when you became famous?
I think it's an obligation for anyone who's in a position like I've been blessed to be in, to have a microphone and to have an ability to speak to the public, to speak about things that are important, not just to me, but to everybody.
How long ago did you return from Afghanistan?
Just got back last week. I've just been fresh off the plane, still trying to get over the jet lag, actually.
And where did you visit?
We were in a few days in Kabul and then a few days in Bamyan, which is in the central highlands of the country.
So you didn't visit the troubled south,
No, we steered clear of the east and the south, where the big trouble was. So I felt just secure enough where we were. I don't want to venture down there.
What did you do while you were there? You're a former school teacher, aren't you? So did you have a particular interest in the educational system in Afghanistan?
Well, with UNICEF, my focus is kind of on education and trying to figure out and learn more about their education programs and the need for education resources and just education in general in the countries that I travel to. So. And
did that UNICEF suggest that you go and look at the educational problems in Afghanistan?
Yeah, actually the country office in Afghanistan, and there's a country office in each one of the countries that UNICEF serves, they put together a very rigorous and busy schedule for us to take a look at what they were doing in the country.
Well, it's one thing for kids to go to school; it's another thing for them actually to be taught something worthwhile. Do you have any sense of what they were learning?
They pretty much, their schools were the curriculum, at least I thought, was quite adequate. The biggest problem was not in the curriculum and what they were teaching, but the facilities and the resources that they had. During the Taliban, so many, and throughout decades of war in Afghanistan, so many school facilities were destroyed, which of course leads now to kids going back to school and not having school facilities. And in addition, half the child population, females, weren't even allowed to go to school in Taliban era Afghanistan. So we've got a population now of school children who are coming in to a extremely underfunded, extremely inadequate infrastructure for education.
And although 5 million Afghan children have returned to school, according to Afghanistan's Education Minister Hanif Atmar, he also admitted that only represents half of the school-aged children, and I have no sense of what's happening with the other half, the kids who aren't going to school.
Well, I think there's a concern for security, first of all, for parents to be able to feel secure letting their kids go to school. At the same time, there are certain cultural restrictions, I guess. Some women are still not allowed to go to school because of family beliefs or whatnot. And then at the same time, there's just inadequate, like I said, supply and inadequate infrastructure for these kids to go.
Who's doing the teaching?
They actually have UNICEF is helping to train a number of teachers. It was quite impressive to me that the number of young women who are teaching, a number of 18-year-old young women who were teaching. But another one of the problems is finding enough female teachers, because in these schools that are segregated by gender, finding female teachers to teach the females has been difficult, especially with the undereducated female population.
So there are all sorts of problems that the educational system faces, but I'd imagine lack of money is the biggest. Is that what you're doing here for UNICEF, raising money?
Well, one of the goals is to raise funds. I think for me, in addition to raising money, and I of course feel that that's quite important, but raising awareness about the positives in Afghanistan. We see so often, it is in the press quite a bit, but unfortunately everything that we see in Afghanistan is very negative. And the press that we hear about the country is mostly related to suicide bombings or insurgent attacks. And I found a very different country while I was there. Kabul is growing and thriving. People are getting back to work. People are getting back to children are getting back to school and really wanting to go to school. And it's a country that's really trying to put itself back together after decades and decades of trouble.
So if all of your fans, those Claymates, get together, there might be some real money going to Afghanistan?
Well, we would hope so. In addition to that, I mean, I hope that people, regardless of whether or not they enjoy what I do professionally in an artistic sense, that this is far more important than me as an artist. It's much more important, and I hope that anybody who has a passion to, we've gone into that country as a nation, our nation, and we've helped them break free of the Taliban stronghold. But going into a country and doing that and then leaving is not really what I think that we're as a nation should be doing. I think we definitely have a responsibility to help them rebuild themselves and help them get back on the track that they were in the 70s and earlier.
In the brief time that you were there, how much of a real sense could you get about the conditions throughout the country? Because they usually show people, the celebrities, they show them the best rather than the worst.
Well, I think a few times that I had to go to the bathroom in a squat toilet, I don't think that was necessarily the best. I did have an opportunity to really see a big spectrum, a broad spectrum of different conditions, and without question, we were in Bamyan and far out in the country, far out in the rural areas, and saw quite dire situations. But regardless of how bad the situation seemed to be for me as a Westerner who comes from kind of a life of privilege comparatively, the spirit of the people, absolutely amazing, very hospitable, and I took my high school social studies teacher joined me on the trip, and she, I think, was quite jealous because the students there in Afghanistan want to learn. I mean, they really want to go to school. These are women who've been prohibited, girls who've been prohibited from school for so long, and boys who really want. I mean, every child we asked what they wanted to do and what they hoped they would be doing in 20, 30 years. Doctors, engineers, teachers, they all have high hopes and aspirations for themselves and for their country, and the spirit of the people really was inspiring.